Now for global business updates, Rotus Oddiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, all our viewers out there. And this is the final weekday of 2023. We're focused on technology. We like to do this on the Global Business Report, our eye on tech. Dangote refinery, kick off that. A lot of people seem to forget that the Dangote refinery is not just a petroleum story. It's not an oil and gas story. It's also a technology story, right? And so we've gotten the third crude cargo received the day before yesterday on the 27th. 1 million barrels, I believe it was from Shell. Fourth cargo on the way, and we should be looking at about mid-January for, I think, diesel and Jet A1. And PMS should follow after that. I hope that in due time, the refinery allows for students to take field trips there. Lagos Business School, Pan Atlantic University, you really have to go and marvel at the sheer size and scale of this project to take it all in. And I hope that case studies are done, because we've all been following where things have started from inception to it being in a free trade zone. And we move on. 2024, I keep saying it is going to be a massive year with so many developments that will be coming forth. So we're still on the technology story. Xiaomi, this is an amazing story. Telecommunications company, they are pivoting into electric vehicles. This is the SU7. It looks like a Porsche from the front. You remember our discussion on electric vehicles. So China again, this is a telecommunications firm. They've unveiled this car. They are going at Tesla. Tesla has FSD, self-driving. They have automated driving. Here it is. It's parking itself. They did a demonstration where it was climbing upwards. You will see a car about to be in front of it. It will now stop. Its sensors will pick up the car. It will stop and then reverse a little bit, align the other. Okay, here it is. So the vehicle is coming. It slows down. It notices the car. It then backs up, allows the car to move, and then it continues to go on and park itself. So they are targeting Tesla. They want this car, this SU7, to be one of their premier flagship vehicles. And I think it's just here's the map. Right. So there it is. You can see on the right-hand side, it's parking itself, and on the left-hand side, which is the first-person view. It's really amazing stuff that we're seeing in the technology space. So that's on the electric vehicle front. Also, we now move to digital innovation, right? Let's go back to that cover. This is from the ITU, International Telecommunications Union. They just released this report, Facts and Figures on Measuring Digital Development, and it's focusing mostly on 5G, right? If you look at this table, they got a lot of tables that we put together here. Africa, unfortunately, is still lagging the rest of the globe. So if you take a look at this and look at the regions, 2G coverage, 3G, 4G, 5G. For the globe, majority of the world, 52% on 4G. You can see 38% 5G. But where is that 38% concentrated? Look at Africa. 58% of Africa is 4G. But if you drill down further, that's mostly the most developed African nation on the continent, which is South Africa, then Egypt, and all the others. Then you can see only 6% in 5G. Let's go back. Let's go back to the prior table. Let's go back. Okay, now, the Americas, look at the Americas, 59% on 5G. The Arab states, 65% 4G. Asia Pacific, 54%. CIS is the Commonwealth international states, I believe. The Commonwealth state, which is Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and so on and so forth. I think Russia is even in there as well. 86% 4G, 8% 5G. But look at Europe. 68% of Europe on 5G. So now we move to the next table now, where it's broken down by income, and you can see the clear correlation. For low income, the LIDCs, low income nations, you can see that only 1% of low income nations have 5G coverage. Look at lower middle income, it's 12%, while they're 80% on 4G. Upper middle income, 57% 5G. High income, 89% 5G. So there is a clear correlation between 5G coverage and development of a nation, because faster internet leads to development, telemedicine, education, so on and so forth. I think there's one more table where we look at, I think it's least developed. So least developed nations, you can see the same correlation, 54% 4G, only 3% 5G. Landlocked developing nations, 5% 5G. Small island developing nations, that's in the Caribbean and so on, only 21%. So now we come to Nigeria, and data from the Communications Commission, the NCC. Look at Nigeria. I mean, this is, if you want to talk about our development challenges, 60% of mobile network coverage in Nigeria is on 2G. 2G. This is as of August of this year. I'm short of words, right? I thought it was lower than that.
That's why USSD is very popular.
And 200 billion naira is still being owed to telcos from the banks because of their ongoing USSD matter. So only 10% 3G, 28% for look at 5G, 0.83%. So the chief technology officer of MTN was speaking a few months ago about this, right? And I want you to compare these two things. If we take a look at a quote from, I think it's Mohammed Rufai, and here's what he was saying. So he says, the fact that we are going to 5G does not mean that we will not cater to the needs of subscribers that require the lower technology, right? So he continues, and he says, essentially, look at the population. He says, as you are aware, devices have to be compatible with 5G for them to be used. We have many subscribers in Nigeria who have 2G and 3G devices, and we will continue to cater to the needs of those subscribers. Now, what is happening there's one more quote there, sorry. So while we are investing in new technology, this is very interesting. While we are investing in new technology, we must also maintain the other technologies that are needed by the people that use them and the people that don't yet have the devices. But what else? What are other firms doing in other climes? Look at some notices. This is the equivalent of the NCC in America. This is the Federal Communications Commission. Plan ahead for phase out of 3G cellular networks and service. They basically said, if you have at the bottom of the screen there, if your mobile phone is more than a few years old, you may need to upgrade your device before your mobile provider shuts down its 3G network. So they're basically telling Americans, upgrade your device. Now you can make the argument that they have more money there, infrastructure, but let's move on. That's in the US. Look at the UK. UK 3G network shut down, and what it means for your business. That was back in September. They're getting ready to phase out. 3G switch off. Move on from there. Who else? This is Asda. Asda is in the UK. They are on the Vodafone network. We're saying goodbye to 3G. Our 3G service will be switched off. And they said that they need to do it in order to focus their investment on 4G and 5G. There's an opportunity cost for this. Even in Australia, I know I'm mentioning high-income countries here, but this is what it is. Australia's 3G network shutdown begins this Friday with Vodafone. Here's what you need to know. That was on December the 14th. So the question now becomes, how do you successfully migrate more Nigerians to 5G? I know the MTNs, the Glows, and all these other folks, they are saying that they are beholden to 2G and 3G, but it costs money. There's an opportunity cost of still maintaining your capital expenditure on 2G and 3G while you're also trying to move to 5G. You have to migrate. But then how do you do it when so many people are poor and using phones that are not 5G compatible? Do you then tell the network phone manufacturers to make a cheaper device that can accommodate 5G? If you see those tables, until we move and migrate to faster service, you're not going to get development.
I mean, that's a very great insight. And so how do we migrate Nigerians? At first, you must take a look at the economic situation. It will make it difficult to migrate Nigerians. But the question is, can we set a timeline? And that's why everything works together. Can we set a timeline for growth? And can we also set that timeline to foster local production of those high-end smartphones that will provide those alternatives? Can we also set up like credit schemes by the network providers themselves?
Bless you. Thank you. I was going to make that point. Device financing.
Device financing. So in such a way that you can get a 4G phone, but you pay with your recharge card. So those are some of the schemes we can also use to be able to facilitate, this process. But all of this can only happen when you have a consolidation of economic growth. And that's one thing we've not had, inclusive economic growth. So my problem with Nigeria is this. Even the days of Jonathan that we grew economically, there were no jobs. The growth was coming with no jobs. That's always the problem I've always had. So we have not gotten that last end of trickle-down economics. If you check economic data from the 80s, 84, 85, 86, that economic data was saying, 3% unemployment rate. There was still lackluster job. The job market was already plummeting, even into the early 90s. So how can we have a truly holistic economic growth is something they're going to crack. I want to now go back to that debate yesterday as I wrap up my point, because you talked about the Xiaomi today. Rotus, you have just hit the nail on the head of my argument. You see, when I argued yesterday, I'm happy you had Babatini Rukereko. The only thing governments can do to be able to stem the tide of what I call toxic competition is to have anti-competition bodies. And it dates back. You remember Standard Oil?
Yep.
How the Xiaomi Act got into place, I think in late 1884 thereabout. I don't know the particular year now, but the late 1800s. And how they were able to stem the tide of Standard Oil. It was even a journalist that did the work. I think it was Ida Tabo or something that was a whistleblower. But let me now go back to show you that the West is hypocritical, especially these Americans that complain about the resurgence of Chinese electric cars. As at early 1900s, the Americans accelerated in the development of cars when Henry Ford made his T model, which is one of the most successful cars in the last century.
Yes, indeed.
Because of mass production and edge of fabrication they had, and also, you know, he was partnering with Andrew Carnegie, and there was a lot of steel, they were able to undercut the price of cars, an average car, from about $780 thereabout, then money, to about $219. So what did the other car producers, what did you think they did? A lot of them went out of business because of the success of the T model. That's competition. So when they were doing it with the likes of the Ford and then, there was no biggie. And they did it up to the 70s until the Germans started with Volkswagen in the American market. At first, the Americans didn't accept Volkswagen because the Americans were used to big cars. But Volkswagen started with an advert campaign saying, think small. Then the Beetle became successful. So it's all competition. And that's what we need to understand.
But China doesn't allow competition in its own nation. That's the problem. well said. Good points. Excellent points, though. Excellent points.
Let me come back to the 5G conversation.
Yes.
I think it's quite interesting. Right from the time earlier this year when Mafab had a big launch for its 5G, unveiling its 5G network plan, the 5G policy by the previous administration, we haven't seen that penetration, at least we thought we were going to see.
See, there,
I think, to be fair, I think these numbers might not even be accurate because Rotus, even for phones that are enabled, the 5G network is not 5G network.
Right, exactly.
Some people say the 5G network is 4G or 3G veiled as 5G because the capacity of 5G as it ought to be is not working. So we need to probe those who say that they offer 5G network services, because what was identified earlier this year were infrastructural challenges which we haven't been able to mitigate in Nigeria. These are some of the challenges we have on this continent as to why it's not working. It's not just because there are many people, okay, let me not say many people, a number of people who have 5G enabled phones but don't have 5G service. Right. My husband's phone has 5G written on it. It's giving 3G energy. Like I'm putting that way. So I think that beyond this, loud talk about we have 5G, when I see it, I literally roll my eyes because I don't think we've been able to get it right. So even the organizations or the companies themselves don't have the infrastructural support, and I think that there are some areas that are not telling us the truth, that 5G is not really 5G. So for that to happen, we must deal with even getting it right in terms of our infrastructure, and then of course the telephones. I don't think in a very long time. Let's deal with the poverty issues first of all. I'm not sure if 5G or phones are priority. People want to eat at the moment, but I mean there are opportunities there, and we must catch up with the rest of the world.
Okay, first, I take a more optimistic view of this. Yes, they may have 5G in Europe, they may have it elsewhere. Here in Africa, I think we should even be optimistic.
Yes.
Because once upon a time, in this same country, let me use Nigeria as an example, there was no telecommunication. People used to go and queue up at Nitel offices.
Yes, sir.
You will see the queue will be as long as 2 kilometers long. You will spend a whole day to be able to call somebody in London or in America. Yes. And there were fights at these Nitel offices. But today, we have the telecom revolution in Nigeria. Everybody now has a smartphone, whether it is 5G enabled or 2G enabled. In terms of penetration, I think, we've gone far in terms of penetration, both in urban centers and rural areas. And it's become a major tool of democracy. Yes. Because some people that even have these phones, the major problem for them is cost.
Yeah. Yes.
A 5G phone is an expensive phone.
Correct.
Most of the people who use phones, that's 60-point-something% that you are talking about. There are people who just buy what they call palasa.
Yes.
All these 10,000 naira. In fact, I think I once saw a phone selling for less than 10,000.
Yeah, correct.
But the person who has it can communicate.
Yes.
So that is the good side of it. But I also take the point about infrastructure, that we need to develop, build infrastructure. It's not enough for the telcos in Nigeria, for example, to say, we'll continue to service 2G, 3G. How well are they providing service? Right. What is the quality of their service? What are the regulators doing about drop calls, about unreasonable charges that we incur? But we will get there. You know, if it's the trend in the world now that you get to 5G, we'll get there. Just as we move from queuing up at night
where we are now.
offices and people going to neighbors' houses to be able to make phone calls. In fact, there was one phone at a time that they called Turaya, which was used by just a few people. And if you carry that Turaya, you must have energy. But today, anybody can carry a phone. You talked about Xiaomi. Yes. Xiaomi is a consumer electronics company.
Yes.
They unveiled this SUP7 yesterday. They will start production later in 2024. And they're saying that they invested about 10 billion yuan to come up with it. But the truth of the matter, to go back to our discussion yesterday, is that, look, this trade protectionism that Europe and the Americans are talking about with regard to China and EV, it can't work. Because China is the second largest producer of electric vehicles through their China BYD.
Yes.
And they have markets. When the Americans and the Europeans left Russia, they are selling more in Russia. They are selling more in Southeast Asia. They are selling more in Mexico. So the logic of protectionism does not always work the way they imagine that it will work. In fact, yesterday, the China Association of Automobile Manufacturers issued a statement saying that in fact exports for China's EV is going up. Yes. That it has increased by about 58% between year on year, you know, between 2022 and this moment now. So that's how the logic, you know, works. Now finally, Google has had to settle 55 million in settlement over violations of privacy.
Yes.
The case is Brown et al. Versus Google LLC et al. And yesterday the judge, you know, had to suspend the trial because the lawyers on both sides said they are going to settle out of court. And I found that curious because they say you use Google and then you use the Chrome engine.
Yes.
And even when you say you are invincible or you know, you are not available, they have access to your private information and everything. And, you know, that again is one of those other sides, you know, of technology and our access to it. World population, the US Census Bureau says it has grown. We're going to be 8 billion by New Year Day, by January 1.
Wow.
So world population will have increased by 1%. Well, you know the implications
of course
for the economy and for economies like ours.
Yes.
Still crawling.
Indeed, indeed.
Well, thank you very much, Rotus, for a very robust conversation on this final edition, actually, for this year, 2023. So the next time we see you, 2024.
Exactly.